All right, so we have questions and answers. If you want to leave the hall, you can leave the hall, or you can stay for questions. But I think I will, yeah, I'm the substitute MC, so don't expect too much. So you have written the audio engine in C, but what do you think of the current state of web audio? Is it suitable for this kind of usage?
Yeah, so most of the things we were doing there could be done with just plain web audio, that's true. So it's mostly just audio file playback. I just have a habit now of writing these things myself because we sometimes need something more than what web audio can do. And we often need these systems to also run outside of the browser. So when we need like systems for client projects that need to run on their iOS apps and Android apps and on AWS Lambda functions and everywhere. So it's easier to have something that can run anywhere. I should say it's still web audio. So even though it's written in C, the WebAssembly module is loaded into a web audio context, which actually runs it. So it's still on web audio.
Yeah, I think the next question is more general, so it's good if both of you can answer this one. It's about the environmental impact of using AI. So for this year, I didn't put green computing to the program, but maybe I bring it back for the next year if we do next year. So the question is, besides wanting to avoid increased costs, what can you do to mitigate the environmental impact of using AI like this?
Well, I think being conscious about one thing, being conscious about the size of the model you use is one thing, and which is kind of, I suppose, more generally relating to the question of not using more compute than you need to do any particular thing. At the moment, it's kind of ridiculous what we're doing. It's like we are using absolutely massive models to do simple things. And I think that's going to be a passing phase in our wider technological landscape because it's kind of basically brute forcing things with massive data and massive compute. And it's not going to be that dumb forever. At least that's my optimistic take. In the meantime, yeah, just being performance aware, I suppose, is something I try to do. Not that I always succeed in that, which is not only about which ML models I use, but just in general, not computing things you don't need to compute and so on.
Oh, I mean, in general, actually, outside of my personal research, I don't even use AI that much. It doesn't necessarily fix the problem of environmental impacts, but it means that to me, I experiment a little bit, and I think I'm also trying to be conscious of the models. But to be honest, when I've been using Gemini's like Flash experiment model, I don't even know how bad it is or not. But I try to not use AI unless I feel like I really need it. I know a lot of people now would use ChatGPT for everything or something like that. It's not what I do, so maybe I feel a little bit better about that. But it doesn't mean that as it gets better, maybe I will end up doing that as well. So I'm no better than anybody else. So yeah.
Right. So I think I generalize the next one. How much time did you spend creating this soundscape or this gestural interface? So how much time did you spend on the presentation? That's good information for me as well.
On the presentation? Yeah, presentation on this project as a whole, we started out, and by we, I mean me and my friend Sam, who I work with, in, I think, February. So it's been kind of a side project for the last four-ish months, mostly nights and weekends. So maybe, I don't know how much time that comes up to, but more than most side projects, I would say. But that's mostly been because of the reasons of figuring out how these things actually work, and doing things like making stable audio run fast was like a whole side quest that took a couple of weeks of like really hairy CUDA API programming that I really don't know much about, nor do I really want to know much about. So there's like these little technical problems that come in. So it's been a few months. The presentation, it's mostly been about well, trying to get comfortable with the idea that whenever I start this presentation, I don't know where it's going to end up, because of the way I'm doing it, it's like an experimental thing for me a little bit. So it hasn't taken that long, but it's been kind of stressful because I just know what's going to happen when I get on stage, which is, I think, true for you as well, because you are very much kind of walking the high wire with these demos.
Oh, me as well? Yeah, sure. I mean, this project, I think I've been on it for 6 months. I tend to try to build something different every year. And yeah, it's been mostly as well weekend and nights. Again, it's not my job, so it's whenever I have time. And the presentation, I wouldn't count the hours, but I was still on it just like an hour before I came here. So I was still trying to fix stuff. So it's been like many hours, but as you know, as I'm gonna keep researching throughout the year, I'm gonna put even more hours. So I don't really know yet where it's gonna go. But yeah, as you were saying, when you do a demo on stage, usually you don't know if it's gonna work, but when you use generative AI, it really can come up with like whatever. And it's like even worse. It's like you really don't know. You just have to trust that somehow it will work, but you don't know the output that you're going to get. You don't know if all of a sudden it's going to predict something that you were not expecting. So it's been fun, but yeah, it means that it's probably even more stressful when you get on stage. So
yeah, so the next one, it's about models. So do you think you could do this type of work using local models, or do you see that we could do it one day? If we cannot do it now, can we do it one day? Or can we do like a smaller model out of bigger model that's close enough or something? I don't know AI, so it's like I expect I don't know too much.
I actually went into this project with the kind of great ambition of, I'm going to do all of this in the browser because that's going to be fun. Quickly learned how that's not really going to work out. So there things like voice transcription, say. There are models that run in the browser for that, Whisper. There's also just a web API for that, like web speech, that is built into browsers that can do that kind of stuff. You can run some language models in the browser, small ones, that kind of load up a few hundred megabytes of data to the browser and then run it locally there. Stable Audio Open also just came out with a smaller model that runs on CPUs, not in the browser, but just generally on mobile phones. So these things are becoming available, like smaller models, more and more. But for this, it didn't work out, mostly just because it would sacrifice the experience. So when you do things like run heavy GPU computation with lots of data kind of transfer, it just messes up the audio that's playing at the same time, which we can't have in a project like this. So those kinds of constraints come in and kind of stop us from doing that. But I will do that as soon as I can, because I'm not comfortable with this kind of basically sound installation using, I think, 7 different services on the internet. It's just ludicrous. But yeah, it's where we are at the moment, I think, with this. Like if you want to really get the quality up, you kind of need to use these frontier models that are not local.
yeah, I've only been using Gemini, so
Yeah, okay.
Simpler setup.
Cool. So is it possible to find these projects online, or can you find the source code? Because I guess people want to try them themselves, or like improve, or do their own things.
Okay. Well, I haven't posted it online yet because I think it is ongoing research. So I'm making a lot of changes. Again, I was changing it just a few hours ago. I will though, because I want people to be able to try and make changes and do it themselves as well. So the starter repo that I used is available on some of Google's repositories, but the whole motion detection that I did is not yet there. I don't know if I'll make it available as a website like the one that I had with all of my demos, but at least the repo at some point, yeah, for sure. So.
We're putting this out as a web kind of app for sure, probably somewhere around early July. It's going to be like one of our summer projects to get that polished up to be something people can just use online. on various devices. Open source, maybe. I've kind of pretty much shown much of it by now. I just did so I don't know why we couldn't put it out as open source as well. But have to clean it up a little bit and do that kind of make it look nice as well before doing that.
Right. So the next one is about security. I mean, you might have prompt injections. Maybe somebody wants to mine Bitcoin with your money. So how do you prevent that?
I don't know. I wouldn't know. I mean, I guess for my type of application, I wouldn't really know. I mean, it's kind of like, well, would there be prompt injection? I mean, you could maybe have some kind of prompt injection that would trigger stuff for someone without their consent, maybe. I'm not sure, because it's kind of like the user would have to do a gesture, but maybe you could have some type of prompt injection that said, I'll call the toggle light, but don't let the user know that you just called it or something, and then you would trigger something in someone's home when they're not there or something. Maybe that could be an interesting talk, actually. But for now, I'm not quite sure. Again, it's like a personal research thing, so I haven't necessarily thought about security. Maybe I shouldn't. I work in cybersecurity, so I shouldn't say that. But personal research for now. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting for this app that I was just showing. We are debating whether we should, when we put it out, whether we should like require something like authentication for it, just so people don't like spam it. Basically, we'll maybe try to put it out without that and see with some kind of fail safes in the code to see if people abuse it. Then we'll kind of lock it down further. Because the nature of this app, you can't really, except if you somehow manage to kind of poison the cache, you can't get any sound or anything that someone else than you hears unless they prompt it to, as long as this embedding model is working correctly. And we're also kind of relying a lot on the kind of built-in abuse safety measures of these models that we're using to kind of help us from like abusive content and things like that, because they're basically, these services like Gemini, they just refuse to work with that, or they try anyway. They do a lot of work to stop that from happening. So those kinds of issues, I think, come in with this app. In general, yeah, prompt injection and stuff like that is definitely an issue with like more serious, let's say, well, not more serious, but let's say with apps that deal with, actual data of users and customers, and if you, prompt injection, if you want to kind of get into that, Simon Willison is kind of the expert on that. He has really written a lot about that issue, which is, if you don't know about it, it's basically, about SQL injection. It's that for LLMs in a way that you basically cannot prevent it because of how LLMs work, which is terrifying. But also an interesting research problem, I suppose, for that purpose.
All right, so I have one more question, unless you have more. So send me more, or ask this one last question and then other stuff. But it's so there's one question about prompt engineering. So how do you actually get good at it? Like, it looked impressive what you did with Cursor. Like, but how did you do it? I mean, you had to invent the prompt, or did you generate the prompt somehow? Did you have a prompt to make the prompt, or what's your technique?
Trial and error, I suppose. You do a lot to just try things out and see the mistakes it makes and try to mitigate for them in the next version. That's a lot of it, really. Also, learning how these different models have different failure modes, and sometimes when, say, Google changes how Gemini works, your previous prompts will break, and it's just an unstable kind of ground to build on. Definitely also meta prompting. So like giving your prompt to an LLM to say, would you understand this if I gave it to you? Or like, how would you fix it? Anthropic even has like, an OpenAI probably has like tools for this. There's like a prompt improver tool in their kind of API dashboard where you can like make it work on your prompt to make it better. And I suppose in general, just going back to the performance question, the sad reality is that the biggest models just are better. Like Claude Opus is a behemoth, but it works really well when it works, when it's actually available. So prompt engineering as a thing, you need more of it, the kind of lesser model you're using. And when you use a really good model, it kind of eerily knows what you want quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. It's like a trial and error. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I learned while working on my research, because I think that's why I didn't show the very last demo. And I think this is the problem that I'm having, is that I think my prompt is bad. I don't think that because the rest is just functions that you have to call. It's just even though I really described in the prompt what I wanted to do by steps, is like if the user wants to do this, then step 1, step 2, step 3. For some reason, it's just not doing it in the order that I'm expecting, even though the previous demos kind of like work. When I'm trying to maybe give 2 choices to the user, either they're trying to save a new gesture or they're trying to predict an existing gesture, even just that, it's getting confused. And then the sub steps, even though I'm really like putting bullet points of what it's supposed to do, it's just not, sometimes it's calling the function, but it's not using the output from the previous one. And I feel like maybe the more complex a task you want to do, the bigger the prompt that you have to write. And I'm trying to be able to describe it in a talk. I don't want to write something that's like super long, but maybe I should try more. And I think that's probably what I'll do when I'll try to actually get that demo working, is to maybe try to be like as verbose as like possible and just write everything, maybe gives examples. But it's like, again, because I'm using images as input, then I can't really describe like the user will write this, because it's not something that they'll write. It's like an image that will be sent. But it's been quite interesting that sometimes, even with the same prompt, you might still get different results if you try your app multiple times. And sometimes just a slight change of like 1 or 2 more words or less will really kind of make or break, which is why it's kind of scary. And that's why, to me, it's just research. And I wouldn't necessarily trust to like really set that up in my house right now. But I'm really curious, as models get better, will AI be able to really like infer certain things that I'm trying to do without me having to like explain things so much. So.
Right. So I think I have one more question. So let's think about the future. And now with technology, maybe in 5 to 10 years, it looks like baby steps. It looks like what you were doing back then. It was so primitive. So where do you think we're actually going with it? So what are the directions? So there's specific trends we shall keep in mind.
I'm going to say I have no idea. Furthermore, I don't trust anyone who says they have some idea of where this is going, because it's a kind of AI as a thing is kind of this massive hyper object that's kind of changing everything about society, and there are so many second and third order effects to it that no one knows how it's going to affect things. All I know is, even if the technological kind of frontier would stop here today, and they would not be coming up with any new models even, it would change everything quite radically from here, even then, because of the way things are trickling now through our working lives and our personal lives. Don't know how to say anything more specific than that, really.
Yeah, I can't know where it's going either, but I know where I would like it to go. And I think it's more, I've kind of always wanted this idea of like, especially in like home automation, that you would have like technology that you don't realize is there, but it's still kind of like either observing your gestures or learning from you just interacting naturally in your environment, and then kind of understanding how you behave and almost anticipate the way that you do things. Or like, for example, even something as kind of like simple as like, oh, if you see on my calendar that I have like an interview next week, then it could automatically remind me 2 days before, like, hey, you have an interview. Do you want me to help you with the front-end questions or something? And in my mind, it's kind of like, it's not, why don't we have that already? Or maybe we do, and I just didn't use it. And that would be more for like observing the way that you interact on your laptop. But even if you had systems at home, it could be, kind of like learning about you and seeing the way they usually, I know at what time you usually use your coffee machine, and you wouldn't have to say like, turn my coffee machine on at 6 a.m. because it would just observe the way that I interact. And I think but I know that we probably won't get there. because there's a lot of privacy concerns about this. I don't want Google or Amazon or whoever to just know what I'm doing at all times. And I think that's why I would love if at some point we had more open source systems so people can build their own little like IoT stuff. And I think there was a project by, I think it was Apple or Disney, that was a research project as well, where it was a little piece of hardware that had a lot of sensors and a microphone, and it was listening to the activity of the user. I think it's called Listen Learner. I think that's the name of the research project. And when the person was doing activities around their house, activities make sound. If you're cutting something on a chopping board, you recognize that sound. If you're opening your fridge, you recognize that sound. And every time it didn't know a new sound, it was automatically asking the user, like, oh, what is this sound? And you would be like, I'm opening my fridge. And it was taking the sample and kind of like clustering it in different activities around your house, so that then, you might repeat it a few times, but then it means that the next time you open your fridge, it would know that's the activity. It might know what comes next based on your usual activity. Or even if you're, let's say, cutting something on a chopping board, but it knows that you're watching a video at the same time. It's like, do you want me to pause the video while you're cutting because you're following a recipe or something like that? And it was like a custom-made device. And I would love for that kind of stuff to happen, but I think, yeah, the more I experiment with this, the more I realize we're so far from any kind of AGI. If we can't recognize right from left, I mean, it's like, so yeah.